Imagine this: a middle-aged black woman, standing nervously at a bank counter, clutching her small bag of documents. She pleads for just a moment of respect, for someone to hear her out. But instead, the loan officer sneers, pushes her papers back across the desk, and says, loudly enough for the whole room to hear, "People like you don't belong in banks like this." The other customers glance over. Some shake their heads in pity. Others pretend not to see. The woman swallows hard, fighting tears, humiliated in front of strangers. But what the smug banker doesn't know is this: the very bank he works for, the very building he sits in, belongs to the son of the woman he just mocked. And when the truth comes out, justice won't just be served, it'll be unforgettable. Her name was Angela Brooks, a hard-working single mother who'd sacrificed everything to raise her son. She came to the bank that morning not to ask for charity, but to apply for a small loan to repair her home. The officer, a pale man in his 40s named Mr. Clark, barely looked at her paperwork. From the moment she walked in, her modest clothes, her nervous voice, the way she carried herself, he had already judged her. Mr. Clark, mocking. "You don't have the income, no assets. Honestly, Mrs. Brooks, you're wasting our time." Angela's voice trembled. "Angela, please, I just need a chance. I've always paid back what I owe. I just need a little help this time." But Clark smirked and leaned back in his chair. "Mr. Clark, help? This isn't a charity. This is a real bank. Try somewhere else." Then, as if to drive the knife deeper, he waved at security and muttered, "Escort her out before she embarrasses herself further." Angela gathered her papers with shaking hands, her face burning with shame. Customers whispered as she was led out. What Mr. Clark didn't realize was that a young man sitting just a few feet away had witnessed everything. That young man was Jordan Brooks, Angela's son. Jordan, dressed casually in jeans and a hoodie, had come to the bank quietly that morning, intending to surprise his mother with news he had been keeping secret. Because Jordan wasn't just another customer. At only 28 years old, he had built a tech company so successful it merged with a financial firm and acquired majority shares of this very bank. And as of last week, Jordan Brooks was the largest shareholder. In other words, the bank wasn't just any bank, it was his bank. But instead of revealing himself immediately, Jordan sat silently, watching the cruel way his mother was treated. His heart ached, but his mind was already working. That night, Angela sat quietly at her kitchen table, her hands folded, her eyes red from tears. Jordan sat across from her. Angela, softly, "Maybe they're right, son. Maybe I don't belong in a place like that." Jordan's jaw tightened. "Jordan, don't you ever say that, Mom. You've worked harder than anyone I know. You belong anywhere you choose to be, and they're going to learn that the hard way." Angela looked up, confused. "Angela, what do you mean?" But Jordan only smiled faintly. "Jordan, you'll see." The very next morning, the bank staff gathered for what they thought was an ordinary board meeting. Mr. Clark strolled in, smug as ever, certain no one could touch him. But when the doors opened, in walked Jordan, not in a hoodie this time, but in a sharp, tailored suit. His presence filled the room. The whispers began instantly. Is that Jordan Brooks, the new majority shareholder? Mr. Clark's smirk vanished. Jordan sat at the head of the table. His first words were calm, but carried a quiet authority that silenced the room. Before we discuss the future of this bank, there's something I need to address. Yesterday, one of our employees humiliated a woman who came here seeking help. That woman was my mother. Gasps filled the room. Mr. Clark went pale, his hands trembling. Jordan's eyes locked on Clark. Jordan, this bank was built to serve the community, not to demean them. We don't measure people by the clothes they wear or the balance in their account. We measure them by their integrity. And by that measure, Mr. Clark, you have failed. Clark tried to stammer out an excuse. Mr. Brooks, I didn't know. But Jordan cut him off. That's the problem. You didn't care to know. The board erupted in murmurs of agreement. And in that moment, everyone thought they knew what would happen next. Clark would be fired. Justice would be swift. But Jordan Brooks had something else in mind. Something far more powerful and far more unexpected. Because true justice isn't always about revenge. Sometimes it's about redemption. Everyone in the boardroom thought Jordan Brooks was about to fire Mr. Clark on the spot. After all, Clark had humiliated Jordan's mother in front of strangers, mocking her for daring to ask for help. But Jordan didn't raise his voice. He didn't demand security. Instead, he leaned forward, calm and steady, and said the one thing no one expected. Mr. Clark, you're not fired. Not yet. The board members gasped. Clark looked up, confused, his hands trembling. Mr. Clark, you're keeping me? Jordan's eyes narrowed. I believe people can change, but only if they're willing to face the very people they've wronged. The room fell silent. Clark's face drained of color. The next day, Jordan asked his mother Angela to return to the bank. She hesitated, still haunted by the humiliation she had suffered. Angela, quietly, "Son, I don't want to set foot in that place again." But Jordan gently placed his hand over hers. Jordan said, "Mom, you deserve respect, and you're going to get it, not from me, but from the man who denied it to you." When Angela walked back into that bank, customers turned their heads, employees whispered, but this time she didn't come alone. She came escorted by her son, the new owner, and waiting at the counter, pale and nervous, was Mr. Clark. Clark's voice shook as he greeted her. "Mrs. Brooks, I owe you an apology. What I said, how I treated you, it was wrong. Deeply wrong. I let arrogance blind me." Angela studied him quietly. For the first time, Clark looked small, not because of his suit or his title, but because he finally faced his own shame. Angela said, "Do you know what hurt me most, Mr. Clark? Not that you denied me a loan, but that you denied me dignity." Her words hung heavy in the air. Jordan stepped forward. Jordan said, "My mother taught me that people can rise, even from their worst mistakes. Mr. Clark, I won't erase what you did, but I will give you a choice." The room leaned in, hanging on his words. Jordan firmly said, "Either resign today and walk away, or stay, but under new terms. From now on, every customer you serve, no matter their race, their clothes, or their bank balance, you treat them with the respect you failed to show my mother." Clark's eyes filled with tears. His pride wanted to walk away, but his conscience told him this was his only chance to be better. Clark, choked up, said, "I'll stay, and I'll prove myself worthy." In the weeks that followed, something remarkable happened. Clark changed. Customers noticed. He greeted them warmly, listened patiently, even apologized when his past arrogance slipped through. And Angela, she became more than just a customer. Jordan appointed her as a community advisor for the bank, ensuring that voices like hers would never be silenced again. The woman once humiliated at the counter now had a seat at the table. This story isn't just about revenge. It's about respect. Angela's pain became Clark's lesson. Jordan's power became Angela's justice. And together, they proved that dignity is worth more than money, more than status, more than pride. Because true justice is not destroying those who wronged you, it's giving them the chance to become better. But just as the dust began to settle, trouble was brewing. Not everyone in the bank's old guard welcomed Angela's new influence or Jordan's new leadership. And in the shadows of that very boardroom, someone was already plotting their downfall. You'd think that after Angela Brooks was humiliated in her own bank and her son Jordan revealed himself as the new owner, the story would end in peace and justice. But when power shifts, enemies emerge, and Angela was about to find out that for every person who respected her, there were others who wanted her gone. After Angela's return to the bank, she carried herself with quiet dignity. Customers admired her, staff respected her, and for the first time, the bank felt more human. But behind closed doors, whispers grew louder. Some of the board members, older, wealthy men who had grown used to running things their way, didn't like Jordan's leadership, and they hated Angela's influence even more. One of the board members, Mr. James, scoffing, "She's just a customer, a housewife, and now she's advising us?" Another board member, gritting teeth, "If we let her stay, this bank will be run like a charity. We'll lose everything." But beneath their words wasn't fear of financial loss. It was pride, resentment, and prejudice they refused to admit. The first attack came quietly. Angela walked into the bank one morning to find her name dragged across anonymous memos. Rumors whispered she was stealing, that she was unqualified, that her son had only elevated her out of pity. Staff began to hesitate when she spoke. The warmth she'd once felt shifted into suspicion. One afternoon, Angela overheard two employees whispering by the water cooler. An employee, Michael, spoke, mockingly, "She doesn't belong here. This isn't her world." Another employee, shrugging, "Don't say that too loud. She's the boss's mother." Angela swallowed hard. Her heart broke, but she stayed silent. Things grew darker when a major mistake appeared on the books. A large loan was filed under Angela's advisory approval, except Angela had never signed it. The forged document was slipped into the system, and suddenly fingers pointed at her. Mr. James, accusing Angela, said, "This is fraud. Proof she isn't fit to be here." Angela's hands shook as she looked at the papers. Her signature was there, but she hadn't signed a thing. Jordan stormed into the next meeting. His voice, usually calm, carried a thunder that silenced the room. Jordan, furious, "Someone here thinks they can frame my mother. Someone here thinks they can undo the dignity she's earned. But let me be clear, if you're trying to remove her, you'll have to go through me." The board shifted uncomfortably. Some avoided his gaze. Others smirked as if they'd drawn him into their game. Because deep down, Jordan knew, firing one corrupt banker like Mr. Clark was easy, but fighting an entire system of people determined to destroy his mother, that would take more than anger. It would take strategy. That night, Angela sat quietly in her kitchen once again, just as she had before. But this time, her tears weren't from humiliation. They were from exhaustion. Angela whispering, "Son, maybe I should just step back. Maybe I was never meant to be part of this world." Jordan clenched his fists. "No, Mom! That's what they want you to believe. They're afraid of you, because you represent everything they don't: integrity, compassion, real strength. And that's why we're going to fight back." Angela looked into her son's eyes and saw something she hadn't seen before. Not just a son protecting his mother, but a man ready to go to war. But what Jordan didn't know was that the plot against them ran deeper than forged papers and whispered rumors. One of the board members had already made a phone call. Not to a lawyer, not to the press, but to someone with the power to ruin Jordan's company and everything he had built. And when that secret alliance is revealed, Jordan and Angela won't just be fighting for dignity anymore. They'll be fighting for survival. When Angela Brooks walked into that bank months ago, she was humiliated, dismissed, and made to feel small. Now she stood in the middle of a storm far bigger than she could have ever imagined. A storm that didn't just threaten her dignity, it threatened her son's empire. Late one evening, Jordan's phone buzzed. A headline flashed across the financial news: "Brooks Financial under investigation, allegations of fraud and mismanagement." Jordan's heart sank. He knew instantly this wasn't an accident. Someone inside the board had leaked false documents, the same forged loan papers tied to Angela, to smear their name. The trap had finally sprung. The next morning, reporters crowded outside Angela's house. Neighbors whispered, even friends looked at her differently. Reporter shouting, "Mrs. Brooks, did you misuse company funds? Did your son cover for you?" Angela's hands shook as she clutched the gate. Tears stung her eyes, not because she feared the truth, but because she feared what this lie could cost her son. Angela whispering to herself, "Lord, don't let my mistake of ever walking into that bank be the reason my son loses everything." But Jordan was no stranger to battles. He gathered his legal team, his trusted allies, and quietly began digging. Days turned into sleepless nights. Paper trails, security footage, emails. Piece by piece, the conspiracy unraveled. And at the center of it all, two board members, men who had sneered at Angela from the very beginning. They had orchestrated the forged loan, the rumors, the leaks to the press, all to push her out and force Jordan to step down. The boardroom was packed. Cameras from major networks lined the back wall. What was supposed to be Jordan's downfall became his stage. Jordan stood tall, his mother seated quietly at his side. He projected the documents on the big screen. Jordan, voice steady but sharp. "These forged signatures, these leaked files, they didn't come from my mother. They came from inside this board." Gasps filled the room. The two men shifted in their seats, beads of sweat rolling down their foreheads. Jordan's eyes locked on them. "Jordan, you tried to destroy my mother's name. You tried to destroy me. But here's the difference between us. I fight with truth. You fight with lies." The room erupted. Reporters scribbled furiously. The conspirators had nowhere left to hide. When it was over, the men were escorted out in disgrace. Cameras turned to Angela, who hadn't spoken a word the whole time. But when asked if she had anything to say, she stood, her voice calm, her eyes shining with quiet strength. "Angela, I walked into this bank once as a customer and was treated as though I was nothing. Today I stand here not to celebrate revenge, but to remind everyone watching, dignity matters. If you strip someone of that, you strip yourself of your own humanity." Her words silenced the room. In the weeks that followed, Brooks Financial didn't collapse, it soared. Customers who had watched the drama unfold lined up to open accounts, trusting the bank because of its transparency, not in spite of it. Angela no longer came to the bank as a client. She walked in as an advisor, with honor, greeted with respect she had always deserved. And Jordan? He didn't just protect his empire, he proved that true leadership isn't about crushing your enemies, it's about elevating truth, even in the darkest storms. This story reminds us that power doesn't always look like money, titles, or fancy suits. Sometimes power is a mother's quiet dignity. Sometimes it's a son's resolve to protect what's right. And sometimes power is simply refusing to let hate have the final word.